So, for about 30 years, from the 70s all the way to 2000, the Persian Gulf was just a storm of revolution, invasion, and two absolutely devastating wars. These decades didn't just change the Middle East, they sent shockwaves around the entire planet. And in this explainer, we're going to break down exactly why.
Okay, let's dive right in. It's easy to look at these conflicts and think, okay, that happened way over there. But the thing is, they had a huge impact on the whole world's economy, its politics, you name it. So the real question we need to ask is, why? Why was this one region so incredibly important?
So here's how we're going to walk through this. First up, we'll set the scene and look at all the underlying tensions. Then, we'll jump into two stories happening at the same time: Saddam's rise in Iraq and the Islamic Revolution in Iran. We'll see how those two crash into each other in a brutal war. And finally, we'll look at what happened right after, the First Gulf War.
To really get a handle on this storm, you've got to know what was in the pot, right? The Gulf was, and let's be honest, it still is, a place with massive strategic value and some really, really deep-seated conflicts. Okay, take a look at this map. What's absolutely wild is just how much is packed into this one small area. I mean, you're looking at almost 2/3 of all the known oil reserves in the world right here. So if you control this, you basically have your hand on the throttle of the global economy. It's no wonder this map is practically a blueprint for conflict. But here's the thing, it wasn't just about the oil. That's super important to remember. You've got four big things constantly stirring the pot. Of course, there's the oil. Then you've got the ongoing instability from the Arab-Israeli conflict. You've got this really deep religious divide between Sunni and Shia Muslims. And on top of all that, these ancient, proud national identities, like Persian and Arab, that often push back against outside influence. It was a total powder keg, just waiting for a spark. All right, let's zoom in on our first major player, Iraq. This is where all those tensions helped create one of the most notorious dictatorships of the 20th century, all under this secular Arab nationalist group called the Ba'ath Party. And this wasn't some overnight coup. Look at the timeline. It's a slow, deliberate takeover. First, the monarchy falls in '58. A decade later, boom, the Ba'ath Party is in charge. But the real game changer, 1972. They nationalized the oil industry, basically taking back control of the country's wealth from foreign companies. And by '79, after years of playing the game, one man is left standing at the top, Saddam Hussein. And this poster, it tells you everything about his method. He didn't just rule with an iron fist. He built this massive cult of personality. You see propaganda just like this, from '89, showing him as this kind, powerful father of the nation, the guy who provides, who protects. But the reality was something else entirely. His control was total, and it was built on one thing: pure terror. Think about this. He put on televised show trials to get rid of his rivals right in front of everyone, sending a clear message. He purged his own party, getting rid of anyone he even thought might be disloyal. Torture was just standard practice. And ethnic groups like the Kurds, who just wanted some autonomy, they were crushed, brutal. Okay, so while all of this is happening in Iraq, while Saddam is building his secular dictatorship, right next door in Iran, a completely different kind of revolution is exploding, and it's going to create his number one enemy. To really get this, we've got to go back in time a bit. So back in 1951, Iran had a democratically elected prime minister, Mohammad Mossadegh, and he did something huge. He nationalized the oil industry, which was controlled by the British. Now, this British cartoon from the time, it tells you exactly how the West saw it. They didn't see it as Iran taking back its own resources. They saw it as theft. And this is the moment everything changes. Just 2 years later, the CIA and British MI6 run a covert op and overthrow Mossadegh. They put the pro-Western Shah back on the throne, and just like that, Western oil companies are back in business. But the cost? My goodness, this one act just poisoned the well for generations. It planted this deep, deep mistrust that was just going to fester for decades.
And in 1979, that pot finally boiled over. The exiled cleric Ayatollah Khomeini comes back to lead the Islamic Revolution. And just look at this picture. This isn't like those propaganda posters of Saddam. This is real. This is millions of people in the streets. Khomeini tapped into all that anger, decades of it against the Shah, against the West, and he channeled it into this powerful new force, an Islamic theocracy.
So let's recap. You've got two brand new, powerful regimes sitting right next to each other, and they are polar opposites. On one side, Saddam's secular, Sunni-led Arab nationalist Iraq. On the other, Khomeini's revolutionary Shia Islamic Iran. I mean, a collision was practically guaranteed.
And sure enough, in 1980, Saddam makes his move. He invades Iran. Why? Well, it was a mix of pure fear and raw ambition. He was terrified that Khomeini's revolution would spread and inspire Iraq's own Shia majority to rise up. But he also saw Iran, in the chaos of its revolution, as an easy target, a chance to grab some oil-rich land and make Iraq the top dog in the Gulf.
But boy, did Saddam underestimate his enemy. For the Iranians, this wasn't just about land, it was a holy war. This quote from a young soldier writing to his parents, it says it all. This idea of becoming a martyr. They truly believed they were fighting a battle of good versus evil.
The brutality of this war is hard to even comprehend. And in 1988, near the very end, Saddam unleashed his most horrific weapons. Not against Iranian soldiers, but against his own people. Against the Kurds in a town called Halabja. Reading this eyewitness account of the chemical attack, it's a terrifying reminder of the unimaginable human cost of this war.
8 years. That's how long this war dragged on. It ended in a total stalemate. No one won. There was just destruction. Up to 1 million people dead. It left both countries completely broken.
And here's the crazy part. The end of that war just lit the fuse for the next one. The mess left behind by the Iran-Iraq War would push Saddam to make another huge, desperate gamble just 2 years later.
So just look at what happened to Iraq, a before and after. Before the war, they were economically stable. After, they're buried under $80 billion of debt. They had this huge, powerful army, but now it's just demoralized. Saddam's whole regime was on the brink of collapse. He was trapped. So what does he do? In August 1990, he rolls the dice. He blames his tiny, super-rich neighbor, Kuwait, for all his problems. He accuses them of driving down oil prices to hurt Iraq. So he just invades them. The plan was to swallow up their oil wealth and pay off his massive debt in one quick move. Well, that invasion instantly became a global crisis. You can't just invade a country and take over its oil without the rest of the world noticing. This cartoon here really sums it up. It immediately pulled in the big players, the superpowers, the whole international community. They just couldn't let this happen. So when you ask who's to blame for all this, it's not a simple answer. Look, Saddam Hussein was definitely the guy lighting the matches. He ordered the invasions, plain and simple. But he was operating in a room that was already filled with gasoline. You had Iran's revolution, which all its neighbors saw as a huge threat. You had the superpowers playing their own games in the region. You had international reactions that sometimes made things worse. It wasn't just one guy. It was the perfect storm of conditions. And all of that brings us back to one big final question. Can you really blame this entire 30-year storm on one man's ambition? Or was Saddam Hussein himself just a product of a much bigger storm? A crazy mix of oil, religion, nationalism, and foreign powers all meddling that made the Gulf the center of the world's drama for 3 straight decades?